On the evening of April 16, 1960, Irene Garza put on her best clothes, picked up her Bible and veil, and walked to Sacred Heart Catholic Church in McAllen, Texas. She was going to confession. She never came home. 5 days later, her body was pulled from a canal half a mile from the church. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted while unconscious, suffocated with a cellophane bag. She was 25 years old. The man who killed her was a 27-year-old priest assigned to Sacred Heart Church. His name was Father John Feit. He was the last person to see Irene Garza alive. He knew what he had done. The church knew what he had done. Law enforcement knew what he had done. John Feit lived as a free man for 57 years. To understand what was lost, you have to understand who Irene Garza was. McAllen, Texas, in 1960. A predominantly Catholic community in the Rio Grande Valley. A town where the church wasn't just a place of worship. It was the center of social life, civic life, and moral authority. The priest wasn't just a spiritual figure. He was an institution. Irene Garza was born in 1934. Her parents, Nicholas and Josephina, ran a dry cleaning business on the south side of McAllen, the poor side of town. Through years of work, they built the business into something successful and moved the family north to a more prosperous neighborhood. Irene was the first in her family to attend college. She graduated from Pan American College with a degree in education. She became a second-grade school teacher at Thigpen Elementary, on the south side, where some of her students arrived barefoot from the nearby colonias. She spent her first paycheck buying them clothes and books. She was the first Latina to lead the majorettes at McAllen High School. She was crowned Miss All South Texas Sweetheart in 1958. She was homecoming queen at Pan American College. People remembered her, whether she was your neighbor, whether your wife was jealous of her. She stood out, elegant and gracious, but she never lost her connection to the community she came from. She was deeply devout. Confession on Holy Saturday before Easter was not unusual for Irene. It was exactly what she would do. She told her family she was going to church. She kissed them goodbye. She left. Her car was still parked outside Sacred Heart the next morning. Parishioners saw Irene that evening. They remembered her, the lace veil, the kneeling in the pew, the confession line. Nobody saw her leave. The night she disappeared. Father John Feit was the visiting priest assigned to hear confessions that night. Church members noticed his confession line moved unusually slowly. He left the sanctuary several times. He was away from the confessional for periods that nobody could account for. Feit later admitted, after first denying it, that he had taken Irene from the confessional to the church rectory to hear her confession privately. A face-to-face confession in the rectory. At night. Alone. Other priests said this was highly irregular. Irene never left the rectory alive. When the canal near the church was drained 5 days after Irene's disappearance, investigators found her body. The evidence. When the canal near the church was drained 5 days after Irene's disappearance, investigators found her body. And next to her body, they found a heavy metallic Kodak photo slide viewer. Police appealed to the public. Whose slide viewer is this? Father John Feit sent them a note. It was his. Fellow priests had noticed scratch marks on Feit's hands after Easter Mass. His explanation: he had broken his glasses and climbed up the outside of the building. Investigators noted that he made at least 6 separate trips between the pastoral house and Sacred Heart Church on the night Irene disappeared. Broken glasses. A forgotten coat. Soiled laundry. 6 trips. The church was 5 minutes away. Feit failed his polygraph tests. Police initially said he passed. The examiner later said the results were inconclusive and that they should have been recorded as a failure. And then there was Maria America Guerra. 3 weeks before Irene Garza was murdered, a young woman named Maria America Guerra had been attacked at another Catholic church. She fought off her attacker. She later identified Father John Feit as the man who attacked her. Feit was charged with assault with intent to rape. The trial ended in a hung jury. Rather than face a second trial, Feit entered a plea of no contest to a misdemeanor charge of aggravated assault. He paid a $500 fine. No prison time. 3 weeks later, Irene Garza was dead. The church told Irene's family that Father Feit would be punished if he was found to have done wrong. Father Joseph O'Brien made that promise directly to the Garza family. No murder charges were ever filed. She remembers coming into the kitchen one day and finding her father, Milo Ponce, a deputy sheriff, sitting at the table with a white handkerchief, crying. Milo Ponce was not a man who cried. He learned later what had happened. Her father had been ordered to hand over his investigation records. His superiors told him they would take over the case. He spent the rest of his life haunted by what he had been told to walk away from. The investigation, publicly described as still open, quietly stopped. Detectives moved to other cases. Newspapers dropped the story. Father John Feit was sent to a monastery in Missouri. 3 years after Irene Garza's murder, Father John Feit arrived at a Trappist monastery. The abbot pulled aside a monk named Dale Tachney and gave him an assignment. He told Tachney that Feit had killed someone. He asked Tachney to counsel Feit for a few months, to determine whether Feit had the disposition to become a monk. Tachney met with Feit. Over the course of those sessions, Feit confessed. He described restraining Irene in the rectory. He described the cellophane bag. He described how she died. He also told Tachney 3 things that had kept him free: the Catholic Church, law enforcement, the rules of sealed confession. He named his protectors, out loud, to the man counseling him. He wasn't confessing out of remorse. He was explaining his safety. Tachney sat with that information for 39 years. He told himself it wasn't his job to judge. Father Joseph O'Brien knew from 1960. He had been the assistant pastor at Sacred Heart Church when Irene was murdered. Feit had confessed to him in the immediate aftermath of the crime. O'Brien told Irene's family and police that he knew Feit was dangerous. His exact words, "We knew he was dangerous, so we shipped him off to a Trappist monastery." That was the church's response to a murder. They shipped him off. O'Brien sat on his knowledge for over 40 years. When Irene's cousin Noemi Ponce Sigler finally got O'Brien on the phone, recorded, and asked him directly if Feit had told him he killed her, O'Brien said yes. Noemi's response, "So why in the heck didn't you do something about it?" O'Brien had no answer. Feit was moved from Assumption Abbey to a treatment retreat for troubled priests in Jemez Springs, New Mexico. Run by the servants of the Paraclete, Feit didn't just attend the facility. He worked his way into a supervisory role. A facility that existed to rehabilitate priests who had committed serious misconduct. A priest named James Porter came to the facility after it became known he had been molesting children since the 1960s. Feit evaluated Porter. Feit cleared him for placement in another parish. Father James Porter went on to abuse as many as 100 children. The man who killed Irene Garza, protected by the church, shielded by law enforcement, cleared by the sealed confession, used his position inside the system to enable further harm. The cover-up didn't end with Irene. It continued. Every decision to protect Feit had consequences that extended beyond what anyone was willing to acknowledge. In 2002, 42 years after the murder, Tachney finally contacted police. He said he could no longer carry the burden. He wrote a letter to San Antonio police because he thought the murder had taken place there. Feit had trained in San Antonio. Texas Rangers investigator Rudy Jaramillo picked up the case. Jaramillo tracked down Father O'Brien. O'Brien admitted that Feit had confessed to him in 1960. 2 independent witnesses, both former clergy, both saying the same thing, both describing specific details of how Irene died that had never been made public. District Attorney Irene Garza said he didn't find them credible. He didn't bring the case to a grand jury. Irene's family pushed. They organized candlelight vigils outside the Hidalgo County Courthouse. They knocked on doors. They refused to stop. Linda de la Viña, Irene's cousin, remembers what Garza said when they confronted him directly. He put his finger in her face. "You will never get an indictment. You'll get one when pigs fly." In 2004, after years of sustained family pressure, Guerra finally brought the case to a grand jury. He never subpoenaed Tachney. He never subpoenaed O'Brien. He never subpoenaed John Feit. The only witness from Sacred Heart Church called to testify was Elena Sanchez. The grand jury did not indict. The grand jury deliberated for 15 weeks while hearing other cases simultaneously. They were given audio tapes of Tachney and O'Brien's statements, not the witnesses themselves. Tapes. When CNN's Gary Tuchman knocked on his door in 2007 and asked him directly, "Did you kill Irene Garza?" Feit said no. He said he didn't know who did. In 2014, a 48 Hours correspondent confronted him outside his Arizona home. He said the same thing. He lived that life, the marriage, the children, the grandchildren, the charity work, for 57 years, while Irene Garza's family was still fighting to have someone charged with her murder. In November 2014, 48 Hours aired their first broadcast on the Irene Garza case. They called it The Last Confession. The broadcast aired in McAllen. A community that had carried this story for 54 years watched it. 2 weeks later, District Attorney Irene Garza lost his re-election. Ricardo Rodriguez ran specifically on a promise to reopen the Irene Garza case. He won. A television broadcast changed a district attorney's election. A district attorney's election reopened a 54-year-old murder case. That is what it took. Rodriguez's office reopened the investigation in 2015. They reviewed everything Ranger Jaramillo had built. They built a new evidentiary case. On February 15, 2016, John Feit was arrested at his home in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was 83 years old. He was extradited to Texas. Noemi Pons Sigler had been 10 years old when Irene was murdered. She was in her 60s when Feit was arrested. She had spent more than 5 decades of her life fighting for this moment. When police came to tell her Feit had been arrested, she said she felt like her spirit had been lifted, like she was no longer carrying a heavy load. She had promised Irene she would never leave her behind. She kept that promise for 56 years. The trial of John Feit began in late November 2017 in Hidalgo County, Texas. He was 85 years old. The prosecution's case was built on 3 pillars. First, the physical evidence from 1960. The slide viewer found next to Irene's body. The scratch marks on Feit's hands. The inconsistent statements. The 6 separate trips between the pastoral house and Sacred Heart on the night Irene disappeared. The failed polygraph. Second, the pattern. Maria America Guerra. The attack 3 weeks before Irene's murder. The prosecution argued Feit had a predatory pattern the church had ignored. Third, the confessions. Dale Tacheny testified at 88 years old. He described what Feit had told him in 1963 at Assumption Abbey. The cellophane bag. The restraint in the rectory. The 3 systems Feit named as his protection. Tacheny wept on the stand. He said this was his chance to finally tell what he knew. The defense argued no physical evidence directly tied Feit to the murder. No DNA, no weapon. The confessions, they argued, were false memories or fabrications from witnesses with agendas. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On December 7, 2017, 57 years, 7 months, and 21 days after Irene Garza walked into Sacred Heart Church and never came home, the jury returned a verdict. Guilty of murder with malice aforethought. The next day, John Feit was sentenced to life in prison. In the courtroom, Noemi Pons Sigler wept. Not from grief, from relief. Justice was served. Irene finally got her day in court, and that's all we wanted. John Feit died in prison on February 11, 2020. He was 87 years old. He died having never expressed remorse for what he did to Irene Garza. Noemi Sigler said this when she heard the news. He now stands in front of the ultimate judge. He left this earth never showing remorse for killing Irene. Milo Ponce never saw justice for Irene. He died in the 1990s, haunted by what he had been told to abandon. Nicholas and Josefina Garza, Irene's parents, never saw justice for their daughter either. They died waiting. Here is what the Irene Garza case actually is. It is not a story about a killer who was too clever to catch. Feit left evidence at the scene. He failed his polygraph. He attacked another woman 3 weeks before. He confessed to 2 separate people within 3 years of the murder. It is a story about 3 systems that made a collective decision. The Catholic Church, law enforcement, the rules of sealed confession, and the DA who told a family to their face, "You will never get an indictment." He was right for 44 years. It took a TV broadcast, a lost election, and a family that refused to stop for 57 years to prove him wrong. Irene Garza was 25 years old. She spent her first paycheck buying clothes and books for children who came to school barefoot. She deserved better than waiting 57 years for justice. Finally solved.